Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Beer Blather 247, The Great Pretenders. Oh, yes, they're the great pretenders, pretending that they're doing well. Their need is such, they pretend too much. They're lonely and toast. Lonely, but nobody gives a crap. Russia pretends it's a superpower. Biden pretends it's confronting it. Medvedev pretends he has something to say. Looney pretends he doesn't love Hillary anymore. Greenwald pretends he's not a socialist asshat in love with Lula. Tulsi Gabbard pretends she's G.I. Joe with a pussy hat. Tucker pretends he's more than a Sputnik mouthpiece. Khamenei pretends he's alive. Columbia University pretends it is an institution of higher learning. Hillary Clinton pretends she matters. Yong Un pretends he's not a drunken fat boy. Putin pretends he's a statesman and the savior of Christianity. And a cohort of imbeciles pretend they believe them. We live in a pretend world. Alas, bullshit is not eternal. Margarine is not better than butter. Yes, we can eat eggs. No, saccharin will not give you cancer. The oceans will not reclaim New York anytime soon. We are not running out of water or oil or time. All the canards of today will not even be a memory 30 years from now, or perhaps even 5. Time to tune off the prophets of doom, the peddlers of rage, and the general variety idiots that monopolize so much of our time. Have you heard what, filling the name of the asshat du jour, said? No, and I don't give a crap. Concentrate instead on the questions that matter. Trust your instincts and plow ahead over the corpses of bad ideas and idiotic fads. Be happy. And in order to be happy, this is Sol Montes Bradley, the largest human repository of useless information from my golden cage in Florida, here with my good friend from Californication, Thomas Victor, the only living expert in World War I flamethrowers, and who knows what else. Thomas, are you still alive, or has Newscom got you?
Well, I've become an expert in my city's code. I got cited for having security bars on my windows, which the code
How dare you?
We told me it was illegal, and I've gone through the entire code, and I have the citation right here, and he cites a code that has to do with parking lots, commercial parking lots.
Well, you parked yourself in your house, I guess.
Well, I've got parking lots on my windows apparently. So I eventually found the only city code that has to do with security. They call them security screens, and the only restrictions are on commercial buildings. There are no restrictions. The Los Angeles code allows for security bars on windows, and the county code supersedes the city code. Correct? Isn't that how it usually works?
I would assume so, but I cannot state it apodactically.
Exactly. So I have to get in touch with the city code division and either speak to someone on the phone or go down there in person. And Thanksgiving is the 28th. So I've been told that these people are going to get off on Wednesday and be off all the way until the next Monday. So I'm going to be dealing with this for a while. But So far, I've spoken to many people in the code department. Nobody knows what any of the codes are. Nobody knows what to do. Nobody knows how to resolve this. I've been cordial to everyone. So, the last thing you want to do is piss off the city code people. So what I have to do is I have to figure out how to get out of being fined for something that isn't illegal without pissing off the code officer and without embarrassing him. I could tell when he sent me a warning, and so I invited him to my property. And so he came on my property and he was wandering around. And I could tell that he knew he'd made a mistake, but he was going to plow ahead anyway. And
Yeah.
so, I have to make sure that I don't embarrass him, because then, who knows what'll happen. I've heard of multiple cases.
Then you'll find 50 more violations.
Well, there's the thing that this guy can cite me for anything, and then it's up to me to fight it. He doesn't have to prove that he's right about anything. And I've read the entire city code, and there is no restriction on residential buildings for security bars. And the code violation that he cites has to do with parking lots. So, I think the best way to deal with this is to call the code division and explain the situation, and then ask them to cite me the number of the section that I violated. What exact number have I violated? And if they can't do that, then I'm going to very, very nicely and politely suggest that they not fine me for something that isn't illegal.
If the code doesn't fit, you must acquit.
This is very typically Californian. The post office is delivering mail at 10 o'clock at night. The mail officer, the mailman, is running behind. So sometimes I hear the mail being deposited in the box at 10 o'clock at night. So this guy is working. He's working 15, 18 hours a day because he's incompetent. He can't do his job.
And you're paying for it.
Yeah. Years ago,
I'm sure there's overtime involved in that case.
Well, these guys, the mail carriers, are getting some outrageous number. They're getting like $95,000 a year just to deliver mail.
Why go to medical school, right?
Plumbers. Oh my God! If you're a plumber in California and Nevada, I mean, your basic starting pay is $100,000 a year. You can make $250,000 a year as a plumber. It's shocking.
Okay, that's it. You sold me. I'm moving to California.
Yeah.
Of course, you're gonna have to spend that and more in housing, fuel, because you make a lot of money and you spend it just as fast.
Well, there have been a few celebrities. Ellen DeGeneres has moved to the UK. Richard Gere is moving to Spain. But the poor leftists who don't want to have anything to do with Trump voters, whatever leftist haven they choose to go to, they're going to have to be carrying entire bushels of dollar bills in order to move. Here, moving to California, good luck finding a place to live. If you're going to rent something, it's going to be a minimum of $5,000 a month. I mean, good luck with that.
No, it's not much better around here, to tell you the truth. But it is way better where I live.
Yeah.
The craziness hasn't reached rural America yet. It might one of these days, but it hasn't yet.
I don't think it will. I think the election of Trump is going to solve a lot of issues once he vetoes and Congress vetoes and Trump gets rid of most of what Biden put in place. Once Trump gets the price of energy down, that's gonna like chop off the zeros on a lot of things.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know that that'll affect housing specifically. On the contrary, it might actually push it up because people will have more money in their pockets. But it sure as hell is gonna drop prices on anything from food and clothing to literally pharmaceuticals. But I don't know about housing though.
Mass deportations, that'll drop the price of housing.
That'll drop the price of housing in California, no doubt about it. Will we have mass deportations, or will we have a more selective get the Agua thing?
It's going to start out. They've said, I've heard Tom Homan say they're going to start out with the criminals, and then they're going to basically move on and move on and move on. But the first people they deport are going to be the Tren de Aragua, terrorists.
Yeah, MS-13, Tren de Aragua, all of these fuckers. They're not a big drain on housing, but their deportation is something to be welcomed. Nonetheless.
Definitely.
What do you think of my list of pretenders? And no, I must put a disclaimer here. It is not a comprehensive list.
Not by a long shot.
No, but what do you think of it? I noticed. I heard Tucker Carlson this week say in one of those stupid podcasts, pretend podcasts, that authorizing Ukraine to use attacks against targets in Russian territory is the most evil thing he's seen in his entire life.
Let's see. Tucker lived through the Rwandan genocide. He lived through the Anfal campaign in Iraq. He lived through, let's see, the Vietnamese genocide of their ethnic minorities.
Don't forget Kampuchea.
He lived through Pol Pot's regime. He lived through the ongoing Chinese genocide of the Uyghurs.
Yes. Nothing like use an entire ethnic group to harvest organs for transplant, right?
Well, he also lived through the Hamas attack of October 7th, which
amazing. He was alive already.
And since that was extensively filmed by the terrorists themselves, you can't argue. You can't dull your senses by thinking of it in terms of an abstract quality. You can't abstract that out. You can when you talk about the Cambodian genocide, there's not any films of it. There's
remember the killing fields?
Yeah,
that wasn't in Kampuchea. That was in
no. That was it was starring a guy who survived the killing field. So it was, but that was a movie. What Hamas did was they filmed.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, Pol Pot didn't send filming crews to document massacres. No,
we've seen the mountains of skulls, and we've seen the photos of the prisoners who went through that whatever it's called, Building 18 or whatever, and out of the the many thousands who went through. I think 2 or 3 survived.
Yes, there are pictures, particularly of the aftermath, but no, they weren't. Listen, neither the Nazis nor UNITAS in Angola, nor the Rwandans actually took pains to document their bestiality
Correct.
and advertise it to the world with great celebrations. All of them tried to hide their crimes.
Correct. And
I believe Hamas stands alone in its disposition of celebrating and taking credit for the biggest atrocities.
well, and also the kinds of atrocities committed were things that you've not seen even from the Mexican cartels, for example.
Yep.
If
And that's quite a bar.
exactly. No, if people were to sit down and spend 8 hours watching the Hamas videos, you wouldn't be the same person afterwards.
No, you'd be having hallucinations the rest of your life.
Exactly. So
I could watch it because I'm already having it. So what's another spot on the leopard?
well, exactly. But
yeah, no, it's not recommended for regular people.
It's the most evil thing that he's come across in his lifetime. Is the same sort of crazy overstatement that the leftists were indulging in during the election season, saying that Trump is worse than Hitler. The Ukrainians are hitting Russian military targets, and the military targets they're hitting are being hit in an attempt to stop the Russians from sending out nightly bombardments of Ukrainian civilians.
Yes.
That's all they're doing. So Tucker's basically saying it's an act of evil for the Ukrainians to try and prevent their civilians from being murdered. That's very strange logic to me.
Well, there's nothing logic in the peddlers of doom. All they want to do is convince you that Russia is not so bad, the Ukrainians are evil.
Yeah.
And the Democrats are evil because they support the Ukrainians, even though the Democrats reluctantly support the Ukrainians in order not to break up NATO.
Yeah.
Because if there's anybody who ever went someplace dragging and kicking and scratching, is Biden in support of Ukraine.
Correct.
He started on the opposite side of the spectrum and slowly was dragged into this position because Europe just wouldn't have it.
Well, okay. Currently, we're hearing more World War III talk than we've ever heard.
Yep.
What was his name? The chief of staff that Zelensky fired, Zaluzhny?
Zaluzhny, yes.
Yes, Zaluzhny said today that World War III has already started. And what
in 1946?
Well, exactly. No, what people are talking, what people are doing is they're putting Russia up at the top of a giant mountain with the rest of us all down at the bottom, cowering, and our survival is dependent on the whims of the Russian Empire. And
apparently,
okay, a British military spokesman, the Russians said that they're now officially at war with Britain, and a British military spokesman said, well, we're ready, and that's basically it. The Russians carried out an incredibly brainless propaganda stunt by firing an intermediate range ballistic missile that had empty warheads. So the warheads, they had a multiple. You know what? I'm going to look it up once and for all. It's called a MERV, and I always forget what multiple independently targetable reentry vehicle. Okay, so this intermediate range ballistic missile had multiple warheads, and it sort of spread out like a
Yeah, well, when you know these missiles, which by the way, this one is not new. It's a slight modification of an old ICBM.
well, and
And,
also it
and
costs
and it has multiple warheads. So when it is over the target, it releases the warheads that kind of rain over it.
exactly like like an
Larger
umbrella.
area. Yes.
And so Putin did this to warn the West and he's also said he's going to keep doing it. And so what the Russians are trying to do, they're trying to make us afraid that one of these days, one of those IRBMs is going to have, nuclear warheads in it. Well, I still say that Putin is never going to use nuclear weapons regardless.
No.
Because
you know who's saying that now?
Who's saying that now?
Medvedev.
Yeah, that's quite a change.
The warmonger, quite a change. I understand that she grabbed Putin and Medvedev by the balls and pulled all the way from Moscow to Beijing and told them to cut it out with the nuclear bullshit because it ain't gonna fucking happen. China does not want to be associated with it.
Well, also, Putin knows he can lie to himself about everything, but he knows that if they use nukes, that's the end of Putin.
Yeah.
Putin
And Russia.
Yeah, I mean, Putin wants more than anything to live forever. So he's not going to sacrifice himself in the name of greater Russia.
No. And his oligarchs are not going to allow him either. They're not going to spend the winter in their yacht in the Côte d'Azur if there is a nuclear war. Are you freaking kidding me? What they want is this shit to end yesterday so they can go back to fleecing Russia and making money.
Yeah.
Listen to this. This is a little bit about somebody who apparently wasn't so much of a conservative. The rhino par excellence. I'll see you at the other end of this relatively short video.
Set the record straight. There's no argument over the choice between peace and war, but there's only one guaranteed way you can have peace, and you can have it in the next second. Surrender. Admittedly, there's a risk in any course we follow other than this, but every lesson of history tells us that the greater risk lies in appeasement. And this is the specter our well-meaning liberal friends refuse to face, that their policy of accommodation is appeasement. And it gives no choice between peace and war, only between fight or surrender. If we continue to accommodate, continue to back and retreat, eventually we have to face the final demand, the ultimatum. And what then? When Nikita Khrushchev has told his people he knows what our answer will be. He has told them that we're retreating under the pressure of the Cold War, and someday, when the time comes to deliver the final ultimatum, our surrender will be voluntary, because by that time, we will have been weakened from within spiritually, morally, and economically. He believes this because from our side he's heard voices pleading for peace at any price, or better rev than death, or as one commentator put it, he'd rather live on his knees than die on his feet. And therein lies the road to war, because those voices don't speak for the rest of us. You and I know and do not believe that life is so dear and peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains of slavery. If nothing in life is worth dying for, when did this begin? Just in the face of this enemy? Or should Moses have told the children of Israel to live in slavery under the Pharaohs? Should Christ have refused the cross? Should the patriots at Concord Bridge have thrown down their guns and refused to fire the shotters around the world? The martyrs of history were not fools. And our honored dead, who gave their lives to stop the advance of the Nazis, didn't die in vain. Where then is the road to peace? Well, it's a simple answer after all. You and I have the courage to say to our enemies, there is a price we will not pay, there is a point beyond which they must not advance. Winston Churchill said the destiny of man is not measured by material computations. When great forces are on the move in the world, we learn they're spirits, not animals. And he said there's something going on in time and space and beyond time and space, which, whether we like it or not, spells duty. You and I have a rendezvous with destiny. We'll preserve for our children this, the last best hope of man on earth, or we'll sentence them to take the last step into 1,000 years of darkness.
Yeah, and see,
By the way, if I get the son of a bitch who put the music on this, I'll kill him.
yeah, I mean the music was ridiculous, but
the words, he was right then, he's right now, and notice that he's warning against the very people who warn us about don't mess with Russia, nuclear,
well, it is a difficult situation in that Putin has been basically on the march for a long time, almost his entire political career. Now, Georgia was an independent country, and when the Russians went into Georgia, nothing was done. And yes, it would have been difficult for us to stand up in defense of Georgia, but whoever was president at the time, if that person had understood that this was just simply the first step that the Russians were going to take, and that, in the future, things were going to be much, much worse for all of us.
Yep. Let me clarify something about Georgia. The Russians were twice into Georgia. The first time was in 2005 under President Bush. President Bush ordered a squadron of F-16s to fly from Iraq to Tbilisi and put a destroyer in front of Tbilisi as well. As the American planes, by the way, the Russians had already invaded and were racing towards Tbilisi. There was a dialogue between the commander of the squadron and the tower at Tbilisi airport. And the commander said something to the effect that we bring a message from President Bush. Anybody who attacks Tbilisi attacks the United States, and we're ready to respond. The Russians turned tail and ran so fast they overpassed Abkhazia and Ossetia and literally vacated Georgian territory. Because of that gesture, to this day, the avenue that leads from the airport to downtown Tbilisi is called George W. Bush Boulevard. And everybody remembers that the US stood up against the Russians and prevented a land grab by Putin. In 2009, Putin did it again. But now the president was Obama. And there was no response. And Putin grabbed Abkhazia and Ossetia, who are now, according to him, Russian territory, though nobody recognizes that. The Rendezvous with Destiny speech is one of the clearest, most moral, and most prescient discourses of any president in the history of the United States, and I'm including the Gettysburg Address on this one. Peace through strength. If we surrender to the threat of people like Putin, we might as well walk into slavery voluntarily. And people need to understand that. Appeasement doesn't work.
Right.
Neville Chamberlain is not a hero.
No, I mean, nobody really sees it that way. But the explanation needs to be made that we're doing this for a reason. And what we've seen in the case of Russia is that Russia was never confronted. Trump confronted Russia and Syria on February 7th, 2018.
Yep.
And that worked. And the same thing would have happened if, for example, we'd sent aerial if we'd sent aerial assets to support the Ukrainians right at the beginning of the war would have ended right then and there.
Think of this, because after Putin was done with Georgia, he invaded Ukraine, not in 2022, in 2014. And nobody did anything.
No.
And then Russian anti-air batteries took down a civilian airplane from Malaysia carrying Dutch tourists back to Amsterdam, I believe it was. And the world did nothing.
Yeah.
And Putin proclaimed the annexation of Crimea, and the world went, eh. Then President Trump came, and suddenly Putin put the brakes on it, and there was no noticeable misconduct for a while. And only a year after this disaster we call the Biden administration took over, they sent 200,000 more soldiers into Ukraine that had already been invaded. The fallacy that Ukraine was invaded in 2022 is pure bullshit. It was invaded in 2014.
Correct. And what makes this whole thing just so demented, when Putin took power, he did what most despots do, and he started whittling down the military because he was terrified that at some point a military leader would arise who would threaten Putin's power. You know, he would become more popular than Putin. So the Russians had announced a reorganization and modernization of the armed forces, which was announced, but what the real thing that was happening was that Putin was hollowing out the armed forces. And then Putin decided to wage a war with his hollow armed forces. And he genuinely expected, okay, you know, just a quick recap, Putin spent billions having his modern equivalent of the KGB, known as the FSB, go into Ukraine and try and brainwash the people into accepting a Russian installed government. And those guys pocketed the money and did nothing. So when the invasion happened, the Ukrainians fought back ferociously, and the Russians were caught completely by surprise. And by this point, we see that the Russians, the daily casualty rate is up to like 1,300 a day, which is a record for this war. They've suffered over 700,000 casualties. They've imported North Koreans because we were always told that the Russians. Yeah, well, we were always told that the Russians would win because they would never run out of war materiel and they would never run out of people. They have run out of war materiel and they have run out of their own people. In fact, Russians are now press ganging citizens of Moscow, which is something that Putin did not want to do. Up till now in the war, the people fighting the war are from all the different ethnically diverse outbacks of Russia. They're not what are known as white Russians. And now Putin is press ganging these people, and they're literally taken off the street, taken to an enlistment center, taken from the enlistment center and sent to a training camp. And then they're at the front lines like 2 days later. So this is a massive change. It bodes very ill for Putin to do this, because it's one thing if the Uzbeks are fighting the war. It's quite another thing if Muscovites are fighting the war. So everything we were told about the Russians has turned out to be propaganda that was spread by people like Tucker Carlson, who said that Putin is he's a natural ally, and that of course ignores Putin's own statements that the West is nothing but evil incarnate.
Yeah, no, but that's the most evil thing that little shit is seeing is the authorization for Ukraine to defend itself.
Yeah,
Which brings me to another thing, because I'm also so tired of the schizophrenia of these retard crowd. How can anybody claim to be on Israel's on the side of Israel's right to defend itself, but not on the side of Ukraine's right to defend itself? How can anybody condemn the vicious attack of Hamas on Israel and not condemn the vicious attack of Russia on Ukraine? How can anybody condemn October 7th and not condemn the bombing of the children's hospital in Kyiv?
Well, what about the massacre of the citizens of Bucha?
Yes. How can it be? How can you square that circle?
Well, you can't, because basically both the Israelis and the Ukrainians are fighting the same people, which is the Russian Iranian alliance.
Yeah, the Russian, Iran, North Korea, China axis.
Yeah, and none of it makes sense. You have it on both sides. You have conservatives who support Israel but not Ukraine. You have leftists who support Ukraine but not Israel. It's all about posturing. It's all about striking a pose. And my sort of statement to all these people is, whoever said life was easy, sometimes you have to go to war. Sometimes you have to support people fighting wars.
That doesn't mean you're a warmonger. That means that sometimes you have to defend yourself.
That's another word, another phrase like racist. It has no meaning anymore. Oh, you're a warmonger.
It never did. I mean, I oppose war. Everybody opposes war, you idiot. Everybody except the clinically crazy dislikes war. We don't like war. We don't like to fight in wars. We don't like to see our children come back in body bags. Nobody likes that. But sometimes is the only choice you have left.
Also, okay, a warmonger is somebody who advocates for aggression against other countries. You and I, before the Israeli Iran war, let's call it, and before the Russo-Ukraine war, we weren't urging the Ukrainians to go to war against the Russians. We weren't urging Israel to go to war against Iran. We thought that it would be in Israel's best interest to bomb the Iranian nuclear research facilities, but we know that generally, okay, the Israelis did that to the Iraqis, the Israelis did that to the Syrians, and no war came about. So if, I'm sure we both thought that if the Israelis had bombed the Iranian nuclear research facilities, that would have been the end of it. So we're not warmongers. Before these
would have been October 7th.
Before these wars started, we were not advocating anybody go to war against anybody else. We're not warmongers. It's another term that people misuse. They use it because everybody else is using it. It's more of this monkey see, monkey do stuff, and it's tiresome. It's time that people accept different opinions without having to resort to personal invective. They
do. I've been called everything in the book because I do not buy into the let's run away from nuclear war bullshit. I'm a degenerate who wants all of us to glow in the dark, or an idiot who doesn't see it coming. Eh, I'm sorry, but I see a lot of projection in that. Number one, if this country is going to play dead or cry uncle every time the Russians threaten with something, we might as well drop what we're doing and learn Russian. Because that leads in one direction and one direction only.
Well, we tried isolationism twice, and it led to 2 world wars.
Yes.
And
Funny you should say that.
before we joined those world wars, we were attacked. You know, it's
Yes.
it
And
doesn't.
we're being attacked daily.
Yeah. No, it doesn't.
And everybody, by the way, and I know people that I love and esteem that say this crap, that this situation in Russia was brought about by the U.S. push to take NATO to Russian borders. There's nothing of the sort.
Well, give me the names of the people who were pushing for NATO to be taken to Russian borders. I want to know who those people are.
Yeah, I want to know that too. But, nobody did more to push NATO to Russian borders than Putin.
Yeah. The day he invaded Ukraine, he warned the Swedes and the Finns to not join NATO, or he would basically nuke them. And they
Yes.
both immediately said, all right, I guess we got to join NATO. That was entirely Putin's fault.
70 years of neutrality. Bloop. Nobody did more to enlarge NATO than Putin. NATO actually rejected Ukraine's request in 2004, before the first Russian invasion.
Well, it's currently rejecting Ukraine's request now. There was so far, yeah. And
I believe, by the way, that Putin is going to succeed in pushing Ukraine into NATO and NATO into accepting it.
yeah, and what's going to happen is that we're going to see NATO bases built in Ukraine,
Yes.
and it'll be exactly the same as anywhere else where there's America.
Poland.
Yep.
But by the way, where is the largest NATO U.S. contingent in Europe today?
Where?
Italy. From Singonella to Aviano, there are U.S. bases all over Italy. Italy is home to about 12,000 American soldiers. We never talk about that, do we?
No, I mean, the thing is that all the reasons given for not supporting Ukraine, they just don't add up to me, because the consequences of not supporting Ukraine are catastrophic in comparison. And the cost of supporting Ukraine for us and for the rest of the world, it can't compare to the cost of allowing Russia to do whatever the hell Russia wants. And once you understand that Putin is an acolyte of this bizarre version of Russian orthodoxy that posits that Russia is the center of the universe and has the God-given right to do whatever it wants, and that the well-being of the planet depends on the well-being of Russia.
Yep. Well, that was my reference at the beginning to him proclaiming himself the savior of Christianity.
Yeah.
Which he actually does, because Christianity is the Russian Orthodox Church. And he's going to, with the aid of God and the Russian Orthodox Church, impose Christianity on the planet. I mean, this guy is worse than a mullah.
Well, the thing is that Putin is imitating pretty much everything that Adolf Hitler did. He wants to exterminate the Ukrainians. He wants Lebensraum in the form of the Baltics, Ukraine, Georgia. Yes. And he sees the very existence of the West as an existential threat to Russia.
Yeah.
So the only way to stop this guy is with a war. If threats don't work, then you have to go to war against him. And
and contrary to what people believe, I think it's going to last less than 2 weeks, unless we get into the building of nation building, which I think is bancom. This work would be over in 2 weeks.
Well, we wouldn't get into nation building with Russia because there's almost no nation to build. We would be required to rebuild the whole friggin' country, and
or build it for the first time, because Russia reminds me of those Western towns that Hollywood made in the Arizona desert. All wooden and canvas walls with beautiful looking little downtowns as you walk down Main Street, and there's absolutely nothing behind the frontage. That's Russia. It's a Christmas window at Saks Fifth Avenue.
Yeah.
By the way, somebody here says, I heard one Ukrainian said that the Russians lost more people in the past 10 days than in the Afghan war, or in the previous 10 days, or any 10-day period since this shit began. The Russians lost about 10,000 in 10 years in Afghanistan.
Yep. So that math is correct.
Well, it's correct for the past 10 days and any 10-day period, because they've been losing an average of 1,200 a day.
Yeah.
They're up to 700,000 casualties and counting. They just got their ass bloody in Kursk in the past week twice, when the Ukrainians used the storm shadows to blow up the bunkers with the North Korean generals in them. And just last night, they stopped a column. Can you believe this? These idiots, these imbeciles. This, by the way, is led to the destitution of the Russian commander of the Southern Army.
Mm-hmm.
They're still sending infantry marching towards heavily armed and fortified Ukrainian positions.
Yeah.
And the Ukrainians are using artillery and drones, not on columns of tanks, but on infantry.
I saw some Ukrainian clips, and they were quite horrifying, because these drones, the way the drones work is, in the last sort of dive to the target, they lose contact with the drone, and it sort of, you see the screen go all snappy and everything. Well, this time they were using the drone on troops, and the last frame before the thing hit was like some guy's face filling up the whole screen, just kind of like going. And
holy shit!
Yeah, and they were out in the middle of nowhere. They had no transportation. It was just like, this is just sickening. This is brainless. The way the Russian military works is that orders are passed down, and people are told, I don't care how you do it, just follow your orders and don't question your orders. And so the reason they haven't developed, they haven't changed their tactics at all during the last 3 years, is that everybody's afraid that they're going to, Putin just carried out a purge of officers all the way down to junior officers for giving him fake news about the progress of the war.
That's the reason I do it for the commander of the Southern Army.
They gave him fake news because they were worried that he was going to purge them. So if they give him real news, he gets rid of them. If they give him fake news, he gets rid of them. So it's like, why are you fighting for this guy? Why the hell don't you defect to the Ukrainians? Why don't you? It's Putin is a nitwit. And I remember all the years that he was considered by the likes of Alex Jones and Tucker Carlson as this
They still do. They still do.
I'm sure they do. Putin is a nitwit. Putin has crapped up everything he's touched. It's
Can you imagine the potential of Russia in the 90s when the US and the entire West was willing to sink as many dollars and euros and pounds as needed to turn Russia into a big partner economically, militarily? And we did. We saved them from themselves in 95 at great cost. And Russia had a golden opportunity to jump from serfdom to on pair with the rest of the European community, and they blew it.
They blew it for two reasons. Three reasons. One, they hate the West. They're xenophobic. They hate the West. Two, they're fatalist peasant serfs. And three, they're terminally corrupt. Every Russian is terminally corrupt.
Yeah. You only have to read Dostoevsky to understand the nature of the Russian character.
Yeah. And all that money that we pumped into Russia went into various people's pockets. The thing is, do you remember, it must have been in the late 90s, early thousands, the great scourge of the United States was the Russian mafia. The Russian mafia was going to take over the state or the country.
Oh, yeah.
And the reason it didn't.
Yeah. Out of their perch in Coney Island.
Yeah. And the reason it didn't was because, like Putin, they were nitwits. The Russians, I read that the Italian mafia would give you like 3 warnings. They would come into your bar and they would say, "This is a nice little business you have. It'd be a shame if anything happened to it."
Something happened to it.
Yeah. How about you give us $100 a week
to protect you?
How about you give us $100 a week to protect you?
Yeah.
And if you refuse, they gave you 2 or 3 chances. The Russians would come into the bar and they would break your face, and that's how they introduced themselves.
Yeah.
And basically everybody banded together against them, and they flopped. They at one point the Russians owned all the like the strip clubs here in California. Yep. They're all gone now. The Russians don't own them anymore. They yep. off.
They did so here in South Florida, in New York as well. Not anymore. But listen to this, because remember when we discussed more than one time how people think that Hitler was an exponent of the right.
Yeah.
And we discussed this because the only reason people think that is because of Soviet propaganda in the 1950s. The Soviets wanted to put as much distance between the communist system and Nazism as they possibly could. So for years they denied the Ribbentrop-Molotov Accords. Of course, in '89, when the whole thing came to shit, all of a sudden we started finding all of the secret documents that proved the alliance of Soviets and Nazis, up until the Nazis decided they didn't need the Soviets anymore. The gang rape of Poland, because people always talk about, the Nazis invading Poland, but they don't talk about the Red Army invading Poland at the same time. And they split Poland and Lithuania between the two of them. Why wasn't that taught in school? Because everybody bought the Soviet propaganda that showed the Soviets as allied and saviors as allied to and saviors of the West, and Hitler as a capitalist pig, allied with the industrialists of the US and England and the colonialists, and that was all bullshit. Well, now people are repeating Russian propaganda as gospel. And I think they don't even realize that. People like Tulsi Gabbard, I don't think she's a Russian agent, but I think that she bought lock, stock, and barrel the propaganda coming out of Sputnik RT and what have you. Russia went into Ukraine to stop the Nazis in Ukraine from taking over. What the hell? Russia went into Ukraine to stop NATO from waging war on Russia. Russia has a right to take over its neighboring countries because it needs a buffer zone, because they've always been paranoid about attacks from the West.
Well,
All of
to
that shit,
get a-
which is nothing but Russian propaganda, is what these people repeat. And the other thing they repeat is the nuclear threat
now,
and the weapons threat and the technology threat, which is it exists only in Russian propaganda.
well, also, I mean, let's say the Russians are paranoid. That doesn't mean we have to like play to their paranoia and like allow them to take over multiple countries. I mean,
It's the same as allowing a transgender asshole 6'5" with a long beard and a longer dick into your girl's changing room. Why? Because it feels bad. I don't give a shit how they feel. I don't care if the Russians are paranoid. They don't have a right to invade their neighboring countries.
no, it's
And
true.
if they do, then everybody, drop all of these pretense and let's go back to the law of the jungle.
Well, the Germany was an empire until 1918. The Germans were on the losing side in World War I, and it became a republic. And the German army signed a cooperation pact with the Soviet Union in 1922, 4 years after World War I. And from 1922 all the way through the 1930s, the Germans were forbidden by the Versailles Treaty from having tanks and fighter aircraft.
Weapons, offensive weapons of any kind.
So what happened was that the Soviets allowed the Germans into Soviet territory where they could train on tanks and aircraft and all that stuff. So the Soviet German, the Nazis took over in 1933. So beginning from 1922 all the way up until, Operation Barbarossa in 1941, when the Nazis invaded the Soviet Union, I mean, they were buddies, they were pals.
Yeah.
So, and and again, if somebody ever tells you that the Nazis were far right, just point out that the Nazism is a collectivist ideology, and therefore that fact alone excludes it from being anything to do with the right wing. So,
Yeah. No, it's we're still going. Oh, they're a great military power. They're not. We've been saying it we said it before they invaded. Before the Russians invaded Ukraine, in this show, we were discussing how they're not, if they do it, they won't be able to conquer Ukraine unless Kiev falls within a week. These people are doomed.
Well, I remember sometime in the 80s, I think it had to be in the late 80s, there was a novel called Gorky Park written by he was a New Mexican Pima Indian named Martin Cruz Smith. And he wrote this novel about a crime that was committed in the Soviet Union. And sure, it was a novel, but Martin Cruz Smith had spent a long time in Russia, in the Soviet Union. And just reading that, I mean, aside from the crime, it was like a dystopia. It was horrifying. When my brother went to the Soviet Union in 1979 on a sort of exchange trip, it was a nightmare. It was an absolute nightmare.
By the way,
what?
The exchange trip started all about that time.
Yeah.
And I remember at NYU we had I was roommates with the first exchange student from Poland, and there were two from China, a couple from Russia. Those were the first ones, and these were committed communists. That's why they were picked for the exchange program, and still the things they told you were hair raising.
Yeah. No, it's I don't know. I you were talking about Russian unemployment is down to 2%, which means
2.4.
What's that?
2.4%.
Which means that the Russians are finding it extremely hard to hire people because there's a tiny pool of unemployed people to hire.
The problem with the Russian unemployment rate, before anybody says, "Oh, that's great, they have everybody working," no, the problem is they don't have workers. The problem is that on top of dismal economic performance, according to the latest report from the Russian Central Bank, the inflation in Russia is over the roof. Food products have gone up 60-70% in the past year. There is a complete lack of Western products. They're just run out. They already consumed the inventories. Their manufacture is almost limited to the war effort right now. They don't make any consumer goods, not that they were always at any time good with it. They cannot find workers for those military factories. It is a major breakdown of Russian economy today, which is leading to things like this one I'm going to show you now. It's very interesting. This is literally in a suburb of Moscow. What I'm going to show you now, it's not out there in hell, is in Komunarka, is a suburb of Moscow. And this is what it looks like today. Can you see the buildings?
Barely. So there's no electricity.
There's no electricity and no heating. And as you can see, where there are lights in some parks, it's already covered in snow. And these people are just about to finish their collective arses without electricity and heating in Moscow. Not in some forsaken town in Ukraine nobody gives a shit about. Okay, so remember when the Russians were threatening Europe that you're going to freeze in the winter?
Yeah.
And the Russians turned into icicles instead? Well, it's about to happen again. About to happen again. And it's... I cannot even begin to describe the mess. The rubble is in free fall, finally. Part of the deal is Chinese banks refuse to pay for Russian exports now. Did you know that?
No.
Oh, they fear third-party sanctions. You see, if a bank deals with Russia, it cannot deal with Europe or the US. And the Chinese don't want their banks to fall victim to the sandwich of sanctions.
Sure.
So if they have to choose between cutting deals with Germany, cutting deals with the US, or cutting deals with Russia, do svidaniya, Ivan.
No, I mean, Russia doesn't really have anything to offer them.
Nothing. They have nothing to offer China. They have nothing to offer the Russians. So the Russians are fucked up. Their economy is destroyed. They run out of just about everything. They do manufacture shells for their artillery. They manufacture about 20% of what they need to replace what they use. That's why they've been using artillery shells from Iran and North Korea. Well, from Iran, we're using because right now Iran is in no mood to dispose of anything they have. And North Korea has a failure rate of better than 40%.
Yep.
And they also don't have such tremendous stockpiles that can keep sending stuff to Russia much longer. And the Chinese are not doing it now because they cannot receive payments from the Russians. Yay! They're fucked.
Yeah, they really are.
And now they're going to spend the winter. Because you and I discussed another thing. The Russian, for the Russian people at large, all of this shit wasn't even real. You know, there's something going on in Ukraine, but I don't give a shit. I'm going to the mall. It's getting real. It's getting real. When goods disappear from stores and the few that remain, nobody can afford. And food is beginning to get scarce, and at any rate is twice as much as it was last year, and getting worse. The only thing keeping, you know what the only thing keeping Russia alive today is?
You told me last night.
Imports from Germany.
From Germany, that's it.
Always the fucking Germans. And Germany, what Germany did to bypass sanctions, European sanctions, is they stopped buying anything from Russia, but they began buying shit from Kyrgyzstan. And all of a sudden, Kyrgyzstani exports to Germany went through the roof. At the same time, Kyrgyzstani imports from Russia went through the roof in the same proportion. So what the Germans are doing is buying shit from Russia through Kyrgyzstan. How long do you think that's going to go on now that we all know?
Well, also Schultz is on the way out eventually.
Oh, he's out on February 23rd. Simple as that. Simple as that. And we're going to have CDU and AFD take over the German government, and the social democratic love affair with Russia is about to come to an end.
Yeah, and it's about time, for Christ's sake. Like the Russians, you know, I mean, I'm not, of course, talking about individual Russians, but just the country, the government, the culture, it's everything that it's associated with is negative. It's associated with failure, with corruption, with you know, imperialism, with violence, with alcoholism. It's just really it's incredible. And like, here's a country that's blessed with so many natural resources, and you know, look at them. I don't know. It's really spectacular.
It's crazy, my friend, and it's gotta be. I'm trying to see if I can find this. Oh yeah, I have a lovely little graphic for you here. This is the volume of German exports of Kyrgyzstan. There we go. Let me see if this will fit the screen. Okay, this is German exports to Kyrgyzstan.
Wow.
You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That's not to Kyrgyzstan. That's not to Kyrgyzstan. And what you see in March of 22 is not a coincidence either.
No.
So this is the kind of shit that is going on. And on the 23rd, Scholz has been forced to call on elections. The elections will be held on February 23rd. He's going to lose, and he's going to lose badly. An AFD that wasn't even an asterisk in German politics 10 years ago is going to be the second largest party, if not probably the second largest party, right after the right after the Christian Democrats, but not the Christian Democrats as they once were with Kohl or even with Honecker's stepchild, Angela Merkel.
Mm-hmm.
They're gonna the Christian Democrats are gonna have about 26, 27%, enough to be the number one. I may be surprised. The AFD may end up getting a larger share because everybody's sick and tired of Scholz and the green policies. Can you believe Germany used to produce 20% of its energy needs, better than that, more like 27% of its energy needs, with nuclear plants?
Yep.
They were in perfect shape. They were wonderful. They were German engineering at its best, and they were demolished.
Yeah, yeah.
Out of the fucking blue.
That happened under Merkel.
Yes, because she was going to replace that I don't know, environmentalist nightmare, I don't know why, with Russian gas.
Well, and
That
like
worked out beautiful, didn't it?
no, and like everybody knew at the time that this was going to lead to disaster, but they did it anyway. It's just like it's
Yeah.
really, really pathetic.
The French, which are quite stupid in many respects, but in some are surprising. I think 80% of the energy is nuclear now.
Yep.
So what's the point of demolishing a nuclear plant in Frankfurt when you have a nuclear plant in Champagne?
Well, it's like California. California does all this crap that has absolutely no impact on anything, especially given that the states surrounding California don't follow any of these ridiculous, policies. But California does it anyway. And you go shopping online, you go on Amazon, you go anywhere, and you look down and it says, unable to ship to California.
Yeah.
I was going to buy a gasoline powered lawnmower and it can't be shipped to California. So,
but somebody in the chat says Angela Merkel is sad about the return from Trump. She can go cry in a corner, baby.
yeah.
I didn't call her Honecker's stepchild for nothing. She is the product of the communist of East Germany.
Yeah.
In more than one way. But, they're going to get stuck with that. Anyway, we've been going at it for an hour and 14 minutes. So it's time for the reminder, people, because we always must have, unfortunately, the shameful 5 minutes. What is the shameful 5 minutes? When I tell you, straight to the face, we need moolah. So, all of this shit is free to watch, but it's not free to produce, and it's not free to run. So, please, if you have the ability and have it in your heart, send us a couple of bucks. You can do it, buy us coffee, I don't know, put it whichever way, use whatever rationale that you want. You can click on support right here under the video, and send a donation to the channel, you can click on the $sign in the chat and send a couple of bucks through the chat, or you can click on join right under the video and become a member of this channel and help us support us through the month in everything we do here. You can also go to quadverum.com/support us, and that will help run this channel and a social Quadverum or Quadverum forum, where the conversation goes on 24/7 throughout the year. And I might add, can you believe, Thomas, that with the exception of one day when we did an upgrade that bit us in the ass, we haven't had any downtime or anything, even when we had the denial of service attacks?
Yeah.
Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah.
We created quite the structure there. So
yep.
Please do. It's not cheap, but it works. And it does without bots, without trolls, without advertising, without conspiracy theories. It's a little heaven where people can actually have a conversation without fear of some stupid troll beginning to talk about the shape of their teeth or the diameter of their ass. So please contribute and help us keep it going. Terry saying, indeed you did. Well, indeed we did. Because it would not have been possible without the support of people in this channel and in Quadverum. So keep doing it. And if you don't have a reason to support us, remember that even this one works. Hit support because, hey, fuck Clinton. Any reason is good enough. Next week, I'll have another reason for you. So, it didn't even last 5 minutes. Here we are. Of course, we're doing this through... Oh, there is one more way you can contribute to keep us on the run, and that is the subscriptions in my timeline in Twitter, which are $5 a month, and you get, content in there exclusive content that I put there from time to time. And you're also helping this thing because all goes to the same effort. And that is, of course, at the Brother Lie, which is down there in the description of this show. We're not monetizing through Thomas's place, where we also show these for free, damn it. But, guys, there's 1,000 watching. If each one of you dropped $1, you wouldn't have to put up with me pleading for Lula. So, do. And now, forgot. And we're also doing this in YouTube just because. Maybe I just want YouTube to cancel our account altogether because I'm sick and tired of playing this stupid game. So I haven't got it in YouTube. And we're going to talk about anything we want to talk about. And if they want to close the account, they can go fuck themselves. I really don't care. Having said all of those beautiful things, let's go back to this. Terry says, how can you not support us? Well, I support you in ways you don't even believe. How can you not support us? If you refer to us, Quadverum, I'm very glad you consider yourself a part of it because you are, Terry. Pitch it, folks, says Donita. Yeah, make sure you do. And people in YouTube, if you want to participate in the chat, you have to come to Odyssey. And people in Twitter, if you want to drop a message or something, you're free to do so. We may answer it or not over time, but not while we're live because we're not monitoring that at all. You have to click on the link provided and come to the chat in Odyssey. And that's it for the shameless begging. And be glad this is not NPR or we'd be talking about send us your money for the next hour. Did I run out of air? I think I did.
Yeah,
Oh,
boy.
thank you, Sarah.
NPR. God, I haven't watched. There used to be some public television. It was here in California. It's been decades since I've watched it. I don't even know if it's still around.
I used to watch mystery. What was it? Mystery Theater.
Yeah, I
They
think
had
so.
they had some wonderful TV series from England and all that. But I don't anymore because now you can get it everywhere else. I don't think NPR serves a purpose. If it ever did, it could be argued that at one point, they use donations and public money to bring to you concerts and ballets and movies from around the world that were not otherwise available, and that was cool. Now all they uh, bring to your home is uh, ridiculous leftist news programming with some of the biggest assholes in the White House. Uh, and I really can't stand them anymore.
Hey,
And
when I was in
yeah,
the Bay Area, I used to listen to. I guess it had to be NPR on the radio in my car, and the males were like totally. They were all very soft spoken,
yeah,
and um, just I don't know the way the shows were geared. It was just really annoying. I found the station really annoying, and
yeah.
back then there wasn't the plethora of talk radio shows that there are now.
No, or the streaming. Um,
Or this,
Terry says, I enjoy masterpiece classics. I fondly remember the days when PBS brought us the Benny Hill and Monty Python shows. Yeah, you know what? I remember that. And at that time, TV in New York was a monopoly of three channels, or not a monopoly, a triopoly. And PBS was the only station that brought us that kind of thing. But right now, I get it on streaming. I can watch Monty Python all day long if I want to, or Masterpiece Theater, or the Benny Hill Show, 24/7. So why do we need to put money into PBS? Is there a reason anymore?
yeah, PBS, NPR. I can't remember. We used to watch one here, but they had pledge drives every 2 weeks it seemed, and it was just like it was just no, can't do it no more.
That was my reference. At least we're not doing that. But uh, we don't need it anymore. We're wasting taxpayers' money keeping a bunch of leftist assholes uh, on screen. If they cannot survive on their own, they should go or have their own fucking podcast. I don't care. They certainly do not need federal money anymore,
No,
or we don't need them.
definitely.
So that's another afuera that we need to do. Can you believe that uh, Elon Musk and Ramsky's Winnie are now trying to imitate the Millet style?
Sure.
I find
No,
it comical.
well, I mean, as long as they get that result, that's all I care about. It's like,
Oh no, absolutely. I didn't mean anything other than it's funny to watch. I hope they do get the result, and they'll be my heroes if they do.
definitely.
If they do.
I think they're going to, I mean, I can't see any reason why Trump's people aren't going to succeed. It looked like Pennsylvania was really going gung ho to try and steal that election, and it turns out that they screwed themselves, and Casey had to finally concede.
They did succeed in stealing the election in Wisconsin. I'm afraid the Senate election.
Sure.
That 300,000 vote dump at 4 a.m. Sounded eerily familiar. But people think that because the leftist media rushed to proclaim Trump president on the morning of November 6th, they didn't cheat on this election. They did. They cheated on every race in every county in the country.
Yeah.
The fact that it was obviously too big to steal, it doesn't mean they didn't try, and doesn't mean they did not succeed on a number of House races.
Sure.
And I was telling folks too, they also succeeded earlier when the census recognized that, oopsie, we made a mistake in the census. We undercounted Texas and overcounted New York type of shit.
Yeah.
Essentially, if the reapportionment had reflected the corrected numbers in the census, winning in the same jurisdictions that Trump won, in the same states that Trump won, he would have had 320 electors, not 312.
Yeah.
And at least 2 representatives from California wouldn't exist.
Yep.
And 2 more representatives from Texas would be in Congress now. So the numbers wouldn't be 221 to 213. It would be like 230 to 190. So they cheated in the apportionment. They cheated with the census. They cheated with the apportionment in 21 and 22. They cheated in specific elections in California, and as well, California is still counting fucking votes. I mean, come on, really? Look at me. You're in California. They're still counting votes.
Well, because they're desperate to figure out how to steal elections. I mean, Florida had its votes counted in 2.5 hours or something like that.
It's like you gotta be kidding. Forget about how fast they count the votes in Russia. I don't give a shit. Or in Venezuela. They count the votes in Venezuela before the day of the election, so I don't really care. In Florida, they counted all the votes by midnight on November 5. So how come California cannot?
Well, up until the year 2000, basically votes were always counted on the same day. And then ever since then, states like California are taking longer and longer and longer. When they announce beforehand, it's going to take us months to count these votes. We need.
Yeah, when Obama tells you to be patient, the shit is bad.
Yeah. No, we need a law that says you have to, the cutoff date is midnight, and that's the end of that. With the exception of absentee ballots from the military or whatever.
Which I think shouldn't exist anyway.
Yeah, we'll just see. The final count for the Senate is going to be what, 53?
Yep. Should have been 56, but I'll take the 53.
Yeah, 53. And, okay, we've got four Murkowski types, which would bring it down to 49. But then...
No. Number one, no. Even though in 40% of the vote that may be true, The majority leader is still a Republican. The agenda is still controlled by Republicans, and the chairman of commissions are still Republicans.
Sure.
So that alone is worth Susan Collins to me.
Mm-hmm.
And before we complain about Susan Collins, remember what the alternative from Maine is.
Yeah. No.
You know, if you want another Pocahontas in there, sure, get rid of Susan Collins and call an election in Maine and see what comes up. It's going to make you pine for Elizabeth Warren. So we need to be a little bit cautious with that. That said, yeah, we're going to get all we need in the Senate. No question about that. No question about that. We'll get our judges approved. We'll get our Trump's cabinet approved in almost, I'm willing to say, in record time.
Well, Gates said that basically the cabinet was going to, the reason they're picking everybody now is they want the cabinet approved on January 20th.
Yep.
So,
and I think most of them will. I think most of them will be approved by January 20th. And they'll get to work the moment President Trump is inaugurated.
well, the good thing about a lot of Trump's choices, these are people I've never heard of, and that's always a good sign. When it's somebody who's been years in Washington and they're a household name, that's like when you start, like, you know, starting to have your doubts.
Like which one?
Well, let's see. His Secretary of the Treasury is basically an investor. I forgot his name. Yeah.
You know, he's a hedge fund manager.
Yeah.
He is gay, married with 2 children they had by surrogacy. By the way, you know why I'm saying this?
Well, just to show,
all the little shit Democrats who accuse Trump of homophobia can take a very gay Secretary of the Treasury and shove him up your collective asses.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
that's the only reason I mention it, because I don't give a flying crap. As long as he knows finances, I don't care about the rest.
well, the Democrats have lost their marbles to the point where, you know, Ocasio-Cortez is accusing Republicans, you know, they're going to force women to drop their pants to check their genitals, you know, and
I'm a woman. Let me see.
well, this is some kind of bizarre fantasy that AOC has, is that, you know, I'm sure that you know, some of her deepest dark fantasies are about being tied up with somebody demanding to check her genitals, and
she desperately wants somebody to remove the cobwebs.
well, it's just, I mean, the good thing about all of this is that it just doesn't work. I mean, the so-called controversy over the transsexual member of Congress getting banned from women's bathrooms, I mean, that just came and went. That was the end of it.
Yeah. But by the way, wasn't that an ignominious death to the stupid subject? What perspective do you think they have of keeping such let the trans go into the girls' bathroom in elementary schools across the country now?
Well, I mean, Republicans said about Bill Clinton that the country took it made choices based on what was happening with our highest placed politicians. And at the time, I didn't believe it, but now I do believe it. So if in Washington they're just absolutely banning biological men from women's bathrooms, and I have no doubt that it's going to spread throughout the country, and that's going to be the end of this. It's I don't know. This whole era was just so bizarre. I remember here in California. Yeah.
Yeah, you were talking. I just put it on the side to complement what we were discussing.
I was just going to say, I remember in California, they put out an APB for a woman described as having male pattern baldness and a full beard. And it turns out it was a dude who claimed he was a woman, dressed in, trousers and a button-up shirt. Yeah. And they arrested him, and they put him in with the women, and he looked like you. They showed the mugshot, and it was
like me Loretta.
Yeah. And the ACLU said that there was literally no biological difference between males and females. And, once we get to that point, this is where,
paraphrasing James Wood, if there is no physiological difference between trans and cis women, see how they can wait until they shove a tampon up the old anaconda and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, this is just okay. There was an anonymous diarist. He may have been named the Venerable Bede, but I'm not sure. But he had a diary that he wrote during the Black Death in the UK, and he described the sheer madness on the streets of people just running around screaming like off their rockers, young men who were kissing every young female they came across because everyone was going to die, so might as well.
You might as well get it off now. I think it was a Venerable Bede. You had me off. You had me confused with diaries because, of course, I would think of him as a chronicler. But point taken. Yes, it was him, and it's no different in all the doomsday scenarios. It ends with a breakdown of social norms.
Yeah.
If we're all going to die, why not, indulge while we still can?
Yeah. And every dystopian nightmare film, the classics like Soylent Green, it ends up with a super rich minority and no middle class, and just this roiling, sweaty, steaming, poverty-stricken majority. And
the Soviet Union.
Well, it's the world that Democrats want, and
Cuba,
and they themselves would be isolated from the majority population, living in their walled-off compounds, and that sort of idea that this election really proved that the Democrats are motivated entirely by rage and bitterness and a desire to completely oppress those who think differently from them, oppress them in every possible way. And this is why they're taking this election victory by Trump so hard. They still have not recognized why they lost. Kamala Harris in polls is the favorite for running in 2028. I mean, it's mind-boggling.
Because nobody knows the other names.
It could be. I mean, okay, who else are they going to run? They're going to run, what's her name from Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer. They're going to run Josh Shapiro, even though Shapiro apparently has massive skeletons in his closet. Let's see, who else? Gavin Newsom. I mean, they're going to run a bunch of failed governors, and the Republican ads will just write themselves. Gavin Newsom, can you imagine Gavin Newsom trying to run as president?
Please, please. You know, I'm rather disappointed he didn't last time. He would have been a lot more fun than Kakala.
Well, he went on. He had a debate with Ron DeSantis on Fox News, and at some point, DeSantis just pulled out the crap map. You know, you have an app in San Francisco where it tells you where all the human feces.
Where all the shit is, yes.
And that's something San Francisco's proud of. We're the only city in the country that so advanced has this, and it's like, well, who else needs it?
You know, Debbie's saying here in the chat, and I endorse this. The Democratic candidate for 28 should be Walz.
Yeah, exactly.
He was the funny. I mean, him and his wife.
Yeah.
For VP. Let's turn the page. Let's turn the page. Let's turn the page. Why do they always sound like a broken record?
Well, why do they yell? And they have a microphone. A microphone is designed so you don't have to yell. So why are they yelling into the microphone?
Well, in the case of if I were married to Walz, I'd be yelling all the time too. It's like, Abby, get me out of here, or something like that. They scream all the time because that they think that's emphasis.
I remember when Hillary used to do that in her shrill voice, and it'd just be like nails on a chalkboard.
Oh God, she is nails on the chalkboard. I get the wheelies just thinking about it, which leads me, now that we're talking about Hillary, to that other loser that we've made fun of over the past 5 years quite often, Laura Loonie.
Yeah, she's sort of fallen off the map.
Well, apparently, President Trump finally, because you know, I think that Trump sometimes doesn't know who these little shits are.
How could he?
You know, he's busy with relevant stuff, so the antics of an idiot like that go under the radar. And somebody in the campaign says, you need to talk to this girl. She's a strong supporter of you. She's great. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, bring her over. Oh, she's great. And Trump's first phrase about anybody would be about how great they are. And then it's like, oh, shit, who is this shit? And I think they tried to throw it under the train. And luckily for her, she just rolled into the field. And she's out there someplace, but she's not going to get back on the inside of the Trump circle ever. She's done for. Now she pieced the wrong guy. Milo Yiannopoulos, remember him?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Milo, being quite a crazy son of a bitch, if you ask me. I always liked him a little bit better because he doesn't pretend. He is what he is. Will tell you to you in your face. If you like him, fine. If you don't like him, that's fine too. Fuck you, and he'll keep on going his thing.
Well, he's also British, and the British public figures, you know, the way they can I mean, they're masters of the English language, and they can be funnier than Americans.
Way. And Milo is funny. In a way only a certain type of gay man can be. That mordacity, that Voltaire quality. They are masters at sarcasm and satire. In any case, for some reason, he seems to be royally pissed at the loomer. And unlike others, he knows her well from her early days. And he's spilling the beans. It is the most fun I've had this week.
Sure.
Because he's exposed the pretender. First of all, with pictures from the Hillary campaign, when you have Laura Loomer with I'm with her, and Hillary with the arrow thing next to Hillary, kissy kissy. That is kind of like, ooh, that's got to hurt. That's got to hurt. I put that picture, by the way, in SQV if anybody wants to take a look at it. There are also pictures of her when she had her nose job. And he claims that she's the only person in the world ever to have a nose job to make her nose bigger so she'd look more like a Jew. Because she claims to be Jewish, and according to him, she isn't. And even started telling anecdotes of the circumstances under which she decided that to get ahead, she needed to be Jewish. I don't know if he's making it up. I'm not. But it's very... And of course, he has pictures of her practicing how to draw a Star of David. He says that the first time she did, it was a pentagram. And he had to tell her, no, what are you doing? That's a pentagram. It's a satanic symbol. The Star of David has 6 points, and she couldn't draw one. So she started practicing, and he has pictures of her practicing on a blackboard. I mean, to this level, he also says, that she was complaining about how they left her face, and with this unique kind of snarkiness, he says that this is what happens when you get free cosmetic surgery.
Sure.
The wrong guy to piss. The wrong guy to piss. He's literally destroying her everywhere, every opportunity he has. And this is going to percolate, and I think her days of grifting are nearly over. Whoopi, says Kelly, is also a fake. Of course she's a fake. She picked up the name because the anti-Semitic little shit believed that in order to get ahead in Hollywood, you have to be a Jew. The only people who sustain that canard are anti-Semitic little shits.
Well, considering the tiny minority of American actors who are Jewish.
Yeah. But some of them very famous and very good. Some of them, we don't even know they're Jewish.
No.
It surprised the living fuck out of me when I learned that Lauren Bacall was Jewish.
Well, also Scarlett Johansson is Jewish, which she hadn't really talked about very much, but
no. Or Michael Douglas, or Kirk
Michael Douglas,
or Bernie. You know who Bernie is?
Bernie.
Bernard. Bernie. That's what he was called at home. Tony Curtis.
Oh yeah, Bernard Schwartz.
Yes, but even though nobody knows him as Bernard Schwartz at home, his daughters called him Bernie.
Sure.
So, some of them, I wouldn't go as far as to say that they hid their Jewishness, but they certainly didn't advertise it.
No, I mean, I don't know. I mean, just this it's such a ridiculous canard, especially today. Um, you know, like I don't know. I just Whoopi Goldberg. She used to be thin. She used to be funny. Um, and now she's just a big fat bitter old woman.
Yeah. Well, she stopped being funny somewhere around 83.
Yeah, I mean,
she used to do this Jamaican character in comedy, remember?
I think so, yeah.
And she used to be hilariously funny. And then she started putting in her social messaging into it. So it started funny, and then it slowly dipped into dramatic social issues. And in 83, I remember one of these, and I said, well, that's it. I've had it with this one. And then she turned Peter.
I just don't get any of it. I don't get any of it. I don't get if I were as rich as some of these people, I would have trouble not smiling all day, all the time. You know,
True.
Because I mean, as you know, obviously, a dearth, not a dearth, whatever the opposite of dearth is, a plethora of money. It solves a lot of problems. It doesn't bring happiness, but it solves problems.
It helps.
It helps.
Oh, boy. Listen, as somebody who has been poor and has been rich and then poor again, I can tell you, money does not make you happy, but it sure as fuck helps.
Yeah. Yeah. No, in Americans with money tend to say a lot of really outrageously stupid things, insensitive things. You know, if you're worth several hundred million, don't go around telling people that money doesn't bring happiness or you don't care about money. It's like, well, you don't have to care about money. You have hundreds of millions. You
don't care about money, give it to me, you son of a bitch.
That's always the case. I mean, you know, Stephen King.
I'll give your money a carrying home.
Yeah, Stephen King is a billionaire, and you know, he's always demanding that his taxes be raised. And when he's told, just give all your money to the government, nobody's stopping you. Yeah. He says, well, that doesn't solve anything. It has to be raised on everybody equally.
Yeah. And then he goes back to his mansion in Bangor.
Yeah.
Behind his large gates with infernal allegories, and spends most of his days stoned to death. And he cannot get sex even if he paid. He is a bitter little shit with a brain cooked by the abuse of drugs and alcohol over decades.
Yeah, he wrote a book about it, and his family had to do an intervention. He was at the point where he was drinking an entire case of 16-ounce cans of beer a day. And he said that if he ever, he couldn't go to bed with any liquor in the house because it would always call to him. And he was doing so much cocaine that he was leaving blood trails all over the house. I mean, he says he has no memory of writing the book Cujo because he was drunk the whole time. And the thing about all that is if you go through that level of physical abuse of your body, even if you stop, the latent damage just continues.
The damage to his brain is irreversible.
All manner of your body. You look at people, okay, let's see, it was Richard Burton, Richard Harris, Peter O'Toole, Oliver Reed, and I think there was another one. But anyway, these guys drank astonishing amounts. Like Richard Burton drank 3 bottles of vodka a day. And all of them, except for Oliver Reed, stopped drinking. And they cratered. I mean, Peter O'Toole in old age, and even late middle age, he bore no resemblance to what he looked like in, say, Lawrence of Arabia. And Oliver Reed always claimed that the reason they decayed physically was because they stopped drinking. And Oliver Reed famously drank himself to death during the filming of the movie Gladiator. He spent the night arm wrestling sailors of the Royal Navy and winning every time. He had something like,
as long as he was drunk.
He had something like 62 double rums or something. It was some astonishing number, and he died of alcohol poisoning. He just fell over dead. And there are some incredible interviews of him where he's drunk off his skull. There was one in the UK where he came out and he had a pitcher of vodka and orange juice, and he was just drinking it, and he was off his rocker drunk. And I don't know, that level of alcoholism is just spectacular.
I told you about my uncle John Charles. He's the one who died at 93 while helping a nurse at the home.
Right.
What a way to go. And by the way, she wasn't a professional. There was no money involved. He had just an immense ability to get women to open their legs at any age. What he drank a day, you wouldn't believe me. And the other one was Vinicius de Moraes, the Brazilian poet, the guy who wrote the lyrics to Girl from Ipanema. He drank a case of scotch a day. Think about that. If you drink that much water, you're going to have some kind of problem.
Well, I mean, drinking that much water can actually kill you. Yeah, Oliver Reed used to spend nights. He'd spend a whole night drinking in a bar, and then he would create a drink called plonk, where he would take a shot glass of every liquor behind the bar and put it in a champagne bucket and then guzzle that. So that's how he would end his night of drinking. And it's like, I mean, Oliver Reed, he ended up looking middle-aged when he was in his mid-20s. He just sort of stayed in that sort of indeterminate age period. He made a movie. He made a comeback movie where he was lost on a deserted island with a young woman, and the two of them were basically virtually naked for the whole movie. And the movie was a huge flop because everyone was disgusted by the idea of 50-something Oliver Reed getting it on with this early 20s young woman, and that was like a massive crush to his ego, because he didn't see himself as a bloated alcoholic 50-something-year-old man. He saw himself as Oliver Reed. And I don't know, I just the mindset, somebody like Whoopi Goldberg, she's cramming down cupcakes that have like an entire cup of frosting on them.
Yeah.
And
remember, her name is Karen.
True.
She has to live up to that somehow.
Well, she made a movie recently, and one of the reviews praised her courage for wearing a fat suit, and she said, I wasn't wearing a fat suit.
Oh, I like that one. I should compliment her if I ever meet her.
I mean, she always wears like a muumuu on The View, and I mean, she's gigantic. I just, when you're an old person and you're still eating compulsively, that's like really bad.
It's gotta be in her case, it's got to be some kind of psychological
Oh
uh,
yeah.
uh, foof-up. She was never slender, but she wasn't obese after she married this guy, Danson.
Ted Danson, yeah.
A marriage, incidentally, that I never quite understood because she wasn't so fat, but she was ugly. And I always thought like a guy like Danson could have had any woman in the planet. Why this ugly, stupid cow?
Well, she divorced him after he went to a party wearing blackface. And initially she thought it was funny, but then when, you know, the usual suspects attacked her verbally, she divorced him. But that's another thing.
It's
Why the hell?
ridiculous.
Why would you wear blackface? Like what the hell is that all about?
Why not?
Well, because it's stupid. It's. Have you ever
I
seen?
don't know. That depends on the. Listen, I can tell you precisely because we're coming up to Thanksgiving now. And I remember after a big Thanksgiving party in Whitehall, New York, in 1987, November of 1987, I went there dressed as Othello. And
Well,
as Othello, you can bet your ass that I was wearing blackface because I was Othello. White hair. By the way, I still had hair back then and long. White hair, white beard, black face. And it was a great costume.
have you ever seen the movie The Jazz Singer, where Al Jolson puts on blackface and sings this song called "Mammy"? Oh,
Mommy, how I love you, my dear old mommy.
he looks ridiculous. He's wearing white gloves. He's got white lips, and he's got
Yeah, well, but we're talking about a peculiar aesthetic of New York vaudeville in the 1920s.
yeah. And
And,
that's what.
and by the way, because of things like that, black musicians could make it to the theaters later. He opened the way for them.
Yeah, I know all that, but I still think it's a stupid idea. It's like okay, I saw Dr. No last night, and the movie that made Sean Connery stop playing James Bond was You Only Live Twice. And in that movie, it was filmed in Japan, and they made him do a fake Japanese. They gave him like really stupid, sort of slanted eyes, and he looked like Sean Connery. I mean, he didn't look even slightly Japanese. He had his Caucasian features, but he just had the hairy chest. I mean, Japanese men don't have the hairy pelt that Sean Connery had. It was a dumb thing to do, and I'm not offended by any of this. I just think it's dumb.
Right on. And somebody here says correctly, Deb, that the Al Jolson thing in vaudeville was a caricature. And if you remember, there were a bunch of cartoons in the 40s with chorus of black men that are like little Al Jolsons. It was a stereotype. It was a cartoon. I It doesn't offend me. Nothing offends me, frankly. I don't care. I've seen turds in jars at the Centre Pompidou, and they call that art, or a banana now lately.
Banana on the wall with duct tape.
Yeah, with duct tape. It's like, if I'm not offended by it, I'm thinking, oh, that son of a bitch actually put a few $1 million in his pocket with a fucking.
Well, he sold it for $6 million, and okay, that's what gets me. You pay $6 million for a banana that's duct taped to the wall. That means they've got to remove it from the wall, and then the banana is going to go rotten And what do you have left to show for your $6 million?
The picture of the
It's
banana. How about the
apparently,
guy who sold his turd in a jar for $600,000 in '83?
yeah, which is closer to $6 million today.
Jeez, people are stupid. People are freaking stupid. I remember a gallery I went to in Soho in New York in '84. And as soon as I came in, the first thing on the wall was a concentration camp coat in a hanger. That was it. And you knew it was a concentration camp coat because they told you. Otherwise, it looked just like the ones that you could buy in thrift shops in New York at the time, which probably is what it really was. And it's like, oh, come on. It's like, this is no longer art. This is a ripoff.
Well, I mean, okay. I believe that the banana on the wall is art. I mean, if the artist took lipstick and put it all over his hand and then made handprints on the wall, that's also art.
Yeah.
But
if I do a hack toi and spit on the wall and I happen to be Warhol, it may be art.
Well, it'll be art if you do it, but it all has to do with personal taste. I watch a guy on YouTube. I can't remember his name, but he does the history and the background of famous paintings. And so one of my favorite paintings was by Andrew Wyeth, and it's called Christina's World, and it shows a woman in grass with her back to the camera, and she looks like she's raised herself up out of the grass, and she's looking at these two weathered, desolate sort of farm buildings. And what I didn't know, and what I learned from this, was that Christina was a real woman, and she was born with an unidentified neurological disorder that was almost certainly polio. And she was a wife and a mother, and she crawled everywhere. And so she was friends with Andrew Wyeth, and he used his wife for the model of Christina's body, but he used Christina's real hands and arms. And when you first see the painting, it just looks like what looks like an attractive young woman with her back to the camera. And she looks like she's been sitting in the grass, and she looks like she's looking up at something. And so this guy showed a close up in the painting, and she's got these gnarled, she's got some kind of malady of the joints and the hands and everything. And that sort of, okay, the buildings were real, but the hill that she's looking up was entirely fictional. Andrew Wyeth made all that up. He generally took factual imagery and put them into a final product that came from his imagination. And that's the sort of art I like. I'm not into bananas with duct tape to a wall. I will admit that it is art, but I do think that there is such a thing as bad art, and there's such a thing as good art. The banana duct tape to the wall is known as the comedian. Fascinating. I think if you pay $6 million for a banana duct tape to a wall, it's an act of showing off to the world that you have the money to spend on a banana duct tape to a wall. There's some artist, I think his name is Banksy. Yeah, Christina's World. So Christina was a real person. This is the artist's wife, and he put Christina's arms and hands on his wife. The hill is non-existent, but the buildings are real. And if you look closely at her arms and hands, you can see look at her hands. She's got she's got swollen joints, and her elbow is messed up and everything. And it
Look at
turns
the
out,
hands.
well, Christina, the woman in the painting, loved the painting, and she said that she was very grateful to Andy, as she called him, which is, I never thought of Andrew Wyeth as an Andy, but she thanked Andy for making this painting. And the painting hung in Andrew Wyeth's home for several years, and then when he finally took it to New York, that's when it really I think the Museum of Modern Art ended up buying it. But the painting was made in the 1940s. But the art world, it's always been this way. And, there's artists who are basically working out their hostility towards the viewers and the customers and the art buyers. The guy who duct taped the banana to the wall, this is a guy with a lot of hostility. And
oh yeah,
it's all fine, but it's dumb, just like blackface is dumb. It's not for me. I can admit that it is art, but I prefer Andrew Wyeth to a banana duct taped to a wall. And
oh yeah,
the
any day. I'm sorry, any day. The one that I told you put a turd in a jar at the Centre Pompidou. In an interview, he says he did it to show that even my shit sells.
Yeah, see, they're always. I mean, the banana guy said the same thing. It was a comment on the art world and the gullibility of critics and all that, and they loved it. I mean, there's all these videos on YouTube where people are going to art shows, and some guy will just take off his shoe and put it in the middle of the room, and people start taking pictures of it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Unless he happens to be a friend of mine from Spain. If he takes his shoe and puts it on the shelf, everybody dies gassed.
Well, I went to an art show in Japan, and it was pretty brilliant. It was by some artist I'd never heard of, and it was just multiple installations with all these mediums. And in the middle of the room, he had this stack of paper that was inside a custom plexiglass box, and what he'd done was he typed the numbers 1 to 1,000,000 on these pieces of paper, and then stacked them all up and put it inside a box. And the stack was like 10 feet tall, and I can appreciate that. It's not something I would buy and put in my home.
Hell no.
I've bought real art before. I have a few art pieces that I bought from unknown artists, and it just speaks to me. I like art that speaks to me, and I can appreciate the artistry of a lot of art, but it's just not for me. And I also don't think that a banana duct taped to a wall is on the same level as some of the great masters.
No, my house, I think I've showed you once. If I recall, one day I took the camera after one of these shows and started walking around the house. My house is a fucking museum. It's something that everybody in my family shares. We cannot have naked walls. We have pictures. We have paintings. Some of some known names, some aren't. I have things by Siqueiros. The Mexican. Actually, he was a Mexican muralist. He was also a notorious communist, and he's the guy who first attempted to kill Trotsky by order of Stalin. And he did all of the murals in the the Autonomous University of Mexico. Um, I have a number of European painters. I also have antique maps. Different rooms have different themes. And I also have a shitload of portraits from my family, my great grandparents, my great great grandparents, all of cousins, me, uh, all spread in different rooms. And I I can't remember when was the first time my parents took me to a museum, but it's something that I remember doing since my earliest memories. Um, I still, for the life of me, cannot see a banana taped to the wall as any form of art. I know art is subjective. It's to them and not to me, but give me a fucking break. Um, I have trouble um, understanding Andy Warhol as anything other than graphic design.
Yeah, and Warhol Warhol was very self-aware. His diaries were published at some point after his death, and he was very self-aware. And the Warhol, the persona of Warhol was completely different from the person who wrote these diaries. So I think he himself would agree with you that what he was doing was, I mean, and this is where you get into the whole like hostility and you know all of that. I've seen and experienced enough hostility in my life, and so personally, I wouldn't be interested in owning an original Warhol.
As an investment, maybe? Yeah, I don't think I would hang it on my wall.
If I found a Warhol being sold at a garage sale for $100, yeah, you bet I'd snap it up.
Yeah,
But
in a second.
but in terms of the art that I like, I mean, they're all by unknown artists, and you know, I have a couple lithographs, I have an oil painting. I just I do understand that art is it's wide. It encompasses a lot of attempts at creating art. You know, I think it is art. But okay, when I watch movies, I like happy endings. That's I've seen too many. I've experienced too many sad endings.
I don't go there to get a downer.
Yeah, exactly. I don't like downers, and I like artists. I like art that makes me feel good.
Yeah.
There are exceptions. He was a Polish artist, and he started out as a photographer. I always forget his name, but he was tortured by nightmares, and so he started painting his nightmares. And you know, some of this imagery is outrageously horrible, but there's a strange beauty to it that you know.
Yeah, like Goya.
Yeah, and it's really hard to explain in terms of I mean, basically, I like what I like, and I don't like what I don't like, and that's as far as it goes. And I can appreciate the effort. I'm biased towards art that took more effort than just slapping a banana to the wall and putting a piece of duct tape over it, or hanging a shirt. You know, I prefer art that took somebody a lot of physical effort to create. That's just me.
Yeah. Let me see. Deb here says Warhol was an iconoclast. I think that Leonardo was an iconoclast, or Van Gogh, or Picasso. But what my three have in common is what you say, that it actually takes mastery and time, not happenstance, not throwing a bucket of paint to a canvas and see what sticks, like Pollock.
Yeah,
Uh,
I can appreciate the effort of Pollock, but I'm not a fan. Um, his splatters don't do anything for me. I couldn't sit on a bench in front of a Pollock and just stare at it. I would not
no, no,
have been interested.
I wouldn't hang it on my walls either.
No, I like the painter, the Spanish painter Juan Miro, and a lot of
Oh,
people
Mira's beautiful.
argue that his paintings are too simplistic. They're too childlike. But
I don't know. There is an Art Nouveau quality to Miro that I think is interesting.
yeah.
By the way, is this the Pollock guy that you
Yeah,
wrote
yeah.
about?
What's his name?
His name is Beksinski.
That's it. That's it. Yeah.
Beksinski.
See,
Czeslaw Besinski.
see, this is a grim image, but it's not off-putting. It's
No,
strong and it's intense, but it's not off-putting. And I'm not a fan of, like, I don't watch gore movies. I don't look at Ukrainian combat footage that shows drones being dropped on Russians and blowing them up. I don't watch any of that. Uh, uh, in the painting you just showed me, that sort of thing, it's strong and intense, but it's not off-putting. And there is a
yeah,
place
there is not enough detail to be upspotting.
exactly.
It insinuates the horror, but it doesn't, you know, rub your nose in it.
Yeah, there were these two brothers in London a few years ago, and they made these massive installations of, like, Nazi. They use little 54 millimeter figures from model kits. They went out and they bought millions of model kits and glued together these figures and painted them as Nazis committing all these atrocities, but they added like anteater noses to the Nazis and just all this stuff. And it's sort of a one note piece. I mean, they were very controversial because the pieces were so graphic. The brutality being shown was so graphic, but they weren't making any kind of comment on man's inhumanity to man. They were just doing it to, like, make a lot of money and sort of make people upset. And these I mean, these huge installations, they were like, 5 feet on a side or 10 feet on a side of millions and millions of little figures committing all these atrocities. And yeah, it took forever to make and everything, but it had a sort of so what vibe to it.
Right.
Like, once you saw the first little crowd of figures, you'd already seen the whole thing. There was nothing. I went to a museum in London once, and it was like the Museum of the Commonwealth, and they had like this diorama of like an Australian ranch at the turn of the century, and it was in a darkish room with a spotlight on it, and it was brilliant. It looked photorealistic. The little ranch was, I don't know, 8 inches, and then the property and the little fences and the animals, and outside the fences were little kangaroos and everything. And it was great. It was like you could sit there. There were these benches, and you could just sit there and just get lost in thought looking at this thing. And that's the sort of art I prefer. That it takes you on mental movies, on mind movies, and I'm not interested in horrific art. That with the advent of silicone and epoxy, what do you call it, resins, people are able to make these incredibly realistic sculptures that look like actual life-size humans. And there's several British artists that make these sculptures that show like they're basically pornographic, pedophilic images of little kids who were sort of morphing into some kind of entity with multiple legs and heads and genitals and all of that. And it's just basically an excuse for see, there was a photographer named Jock Sturgis, and Jock Sturgis
Yes.
always photographed naked pubescent girls.
Yes.
And everybody defended this fucker, and then finally he admitted, I do it because I'm attracted to pubescent girls.
Because he was a fucking pederast.
Exactly. He did it because he liked to get him naked and take photos of him.
Yes.
And it's like, I could have told you that.
Why the hell would anybody do that?
Exactly. And so any artist who's making these
when I was a budding photographer at 16, I wanted to get women naked and photograph them all the time. Women, not girls.
Yeah. I mean, women are different. And you know, let's see. There's another photographer. What's this?
This is Dali, of course.
Oh yeah.
The reason I put it there is in the chat. Terry's telling us that she has a lithograph of the Ecumenical Council, and this is the Ecumenical Council, where you have a bunch of religious. You have Salvador Dali, self-portrait at the bottom left, and you have a representation of the Trinity, and processions and all that jazz, and it is, if you understand the iconography in Spain, and you, I don't know if you can see the processions there, and on the screen is rather difficult, and and you can see the dove, the Holy Spirit, and Jesus and Mary, and God, and it's kind of like Dali, a very surreal interpretation of the Trinity. But that was him, wasn't it?
Well, I like Dali because he's so imaginative. He's got a portrait. It's a painting of a man kneeling, and one of his buttocks is like 8 feet long, and there's a little wooden crutch sticking out of the ground, propping up his buttock, and it's called something like. It's got William Tell in the title. It's like something like, you know, the thoughts of William Tell or something like that. And that's just brilliant, you know. Or you know, of course, the flaccid watches hanging over the trees. I mean, that's just brilliant.
That's a classic.
Yeah.
You know that Dali was one of the most successful plagiarists of himself that exist.
Oh, sure.
And why do I say he plagiarized himself? He would make a limited series of lithographs, number 0 to 100. And of course, that commanded a specific price, as you know well. The larger the number, the lesser the price. And whatever the series, of course, the closest to the artist's proof, the most expensive. But what happens when you do 0 to 100, and then you print another 100, and then you print another 100, and then you print another 100, and as the years go by, you keep releasing the extra copies you made. They're still selling shit that he printed and kept, and inundated the market with them. He was such a surrealist that he turned the market of his own paintings into a surrealist experience. You gotta love the guy. I
Yeah.
remember an interview he did. I was watching him as he was telling a rather flabbergasted feminazi journalist in Spain that he announced one day. He got up and announced that I have finally found the center of the universe and the place women occupy in it. He found the place of women in the universe. And so the journalist asked him, well, where is the center of the universe? And he says, well, the center of the universe is the train station in Perpignan, specifically the southern bay. And the place of women, the kitchen, that they should have never left. And that was, you could see the face of the journalist, totally scandalized. And you know why it took me years to figure this one out, but I figured out why the train station in Perpignan was the center of the universe.
Why?
One of my cousins is still alive, pushing 85 now. Celebrated painter in Barcelona, Spain. I have a few of his works too. And through the years, I saw his struggles as his name became bigger and he started exhibiting in Stockholm, in Paris, in London, in New York, everywhere. And he was still struggling with money. And part of the deal was that Spain had very strict laws that forbid the exportation of art. So even if you go to Spain and you paint a landscape of a beach in Barcelona and you let it dry, roll it up, and want to take it out of the country, you can't. It's a work of art in Spain. It doesn't leave. So imagine what that does to the ability of somebody like my cousin to actually earn a fucking living, because he goes to New York and he exhibits, but he cannot sell. Whatever he took out of Spain, he has to bring back to Spain or go to jail. So what many painters in Spain did, particularly in Barcelona, was to smuggle their own works, new works that weren't in a catalog. They would paint something and smuggle it out of Spain by taking a train in Barcelona to Perpignan, the closest big city in France. And when they came out of the train on the south side of the station, the French marchand would be waiting for them and they would deliver the painting and collect the money. That was the center of the universe, the place where you get your money. Isn't that beautiful? And of course, the place of the women in the universe is the kitchen.
The kitchen.
Which they should have never left. The feminazi's head exploded in camera. It was absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, I mean, I like Dadaism. I like Surrealism and Dadaism.
Oh yes, of course you like Dadaism. You practice it.
Yeah, well, the Dadaists. I mean, there's a famous sculpture it was done by a German, and it's basically it's a beautiful female mouth. It's two separate breasts, and it's all held together by these wooden. It looks like a really sort of messed up one of those artists' mannequins, the wooden ones that are articulated, that you use.
Yes.
and it's called something like a butterfly metamorphosizing into a machine gun, and outrageously bizarre title, and the subject matter is really fascinating. And the Dadaists were not Dadaism was a response to the First World War. The First World War didn't make sense, so we're going to make art that doesn't make sense. But
rationality brought us here.
Yeah.
So let's go on the other direction.
Go in the other direction, and I've always been attracted to that, and it's really hard to pull off. Nothing is more embarrassing and cringe-worthy than failed surrealism and failed Dadaism. When people are trying to be weird for weird's sake, and it doesn't, they can't pull it off. Dali could pull it off, but there's a lot of people who try to pull it off, and it just falls flat.
It either works or it doesn't. Dali's completely surreal shit. The melting clocks, the things popping up in the weirdest places, things like this. I don't remember who painted this. Who the hell was it? Let me see if I can see something here. Duchamp is the guy who painted this one here. There you go. Look at this. I think this one works too.
Yeah, exactly.
Not exactly what you expected, is it?
No.
But there you go. Just a couple of strokes, and you made a statement.
Yeah.
And of course, the guy had to paint a Mona Lisa that was actually close enough to the original for the damn thing to work.
Yeah. No,
and they say you probably like Esker.
What's that?
They say in the chat, Deb says that you probably like Esker.
Yeah. No, one of the paintings Dali made was these elephants with the what the hell you call it, in India, they have the sort of box on the elephant's back that you ride in.
Yeah.
And but he gave the elephants these like incredibly long, thin legs, like sticks, and so the elephant was like 50 feet tall with these little tiny bird legs, and it's just really brilliant, that sort of thing. But I don't know. I what it comes down to is I really despise when the artist, whether they be a painter or a singer or a movie director or an actor, when they hate their audience and they feel nothing but hostility toward their audience, and they show it in their art. That's what I really hate.
Because what they're doing is show their contempt for you.
Exactly. And okay, there we go. Yeah. No, I mean that's just brilliant. It's so utterly bizarre, and
You see, I wonder how much of the sheet of Star Wars and all that jazz was inspired in these.
Well, exactly. I mean, years ago, people researched things. I mean, okay, Bette Midler started out singing 1940s songs, and she was a researcher
in gay saunas in New York.
Exactly, and
Manilow.
And she was funny. She was cheerful. A completely different person than she is today. And
absolutely.
And the problem today, okay, I saw something today, that there's a new take on the Wizard of Oz out called Wicked, and it's a musical. And just the clip I saw, it looked like garbage, and it's just really the woman playing the witch is she's like single-handedly tanked the movie. I mean, the movie's bad,
Yeah.
but because she took issue with somebody creating a fan version of a poster for the movie, she suddenly called it racist and all this other stuff. And then the woman playing Dorothy, I guess she's a singer named Ariana Grande, who's got this.
Yeah, a singer is too much of a word for this.
Well, she's got this utterly riotous private life where she's like a professional home wrecker, and it's just so like depressing, you know. And
Yes,
and then the finished product is caca, you know.
Well, remember that the target audience was, you know, teenagers.
Yeah, and I you know,
The target audience was 13-year-old girls.
I wonder if they would even go see it.
Well, they used to sing the songs. I saw it through my daughter and her friends and all that jazz. I found the music deplorable, the lyrics sophomoric, and the performances asinine. There was nothing to like in that shit. And, you know, the girls and all that jazz for about 3 months. It was everything about Wicked and then nothing.
They've also, Disney has finally released 3 years later the trailer for the finished Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And okay, that actress can't keep her mouth shut. She wishes that all Trump supporters will never find peace in this life. So
I wish she finds all the peace that people can throw at her in this life.
well, I mean, she's an idiot. She like destroyed her career right at the beginning, and then the finished product. Okay, originally they were going to use actual dwarves. And then this idiot named Peter Dinklage, who's a dwarf, he came out and he said, "Why are we making a movie about dwarves in this day and age? This is outrageous." So then
this is a guy who catapulted himself to fame on the basis of being a dwarf.
Well, this is what dwarf actors said. Now that he's made it, he's pulled the ladder up so the rest of us can't make it.
So the rest of them cannot get a job in a fucking Snow White movie.
Right. So then they changed it to Snow White and the Seven Magical Baristas. That's what everybody called. They were people of multiple genders and colors. There was one dwarf, and then the 6 others were just weirdos, Seattle Baristas. That flopped. Then they made computer graphic dwarves, and the uncanny valley effect was so horrifying that the leaked footage from that made people like scream in horror. So finally they've redone the computer graphics, and from the trailer it appears that Rachel Ziegler couldn't act to save her life.
No, she can't.
It's every line she delivers, it's like this. What are you doing there? And
yeah. Now the only reason she was there is because she did a Kamala on the producer.
Well, she was in Spielberg's remake of the West Side Story, which was a catastrophic flop. Why would you remake West Side Story? That's ridiculous.
Why don't you remake Gone with the Wind while you're at it?
Give it time. Only they'll make Rhett Butler black, and it'll be like really, really successful.
I think right now you're being a prophet, not a critic.
It's so bizarre. And now in this current day and age where okay, there's an actress named Justine Bateman who's come out against everything that we are against, and she said we don't have to walk on eggshells anymore, and that's the feeling I get, that people are they've just said, you know what, screw it, I'm going to say what's on my mind. I think we're all better off. Well, I just think we're all better off when we can. I think we're just better off when we can say what we think and not worry about, I mean, when people ask, when they tell you in the comments to stop saying certain things, I mean, that's really weird. That's bizarre.
I redouble. I remember one day, that I'm not shy. Depending on circumstances, I will not do it when I'm on TV or something. But when I'm having a conversation with you, I've never been shy to say, "Oh, fuck this shit," for instance. And I do, and I am of the belief with George Carlin that there are no bad words, there are bad thoughts. And I don't like the pseudo-Puritan bullshit of having to watch out what four-letter word you use. I just don't believe in that. And one day in the chat, somebody says, well, I'm watching here with my family at 1 a.m. Eastern time. And you're using this vocabulary, you should change your vocabulary. To which I replied something like, maybe you should get the fuck out of here and put your kids to bed. Don't tell me what I need to do. I never liked it when people try to tell you how you should behave or what words you should use or what ideas you should find fashionable. I just don't like it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a good idea to have little kids watching this show. It's not for little kids. And I mean, everything, there should be entertainment for adults. Everything doesn't have to be family friendly.
And when we're doing something at 11 p.m. Eastern on political subjects, this is not made for kids, damn it. Yeah.
No, I just, it just never occurs to me. I mean, I'm not offended by anything anybody says. It's just, maybe I've just experienced too much in life to have any of this stuff bother me. But I never understood the whole notion that Trump should stop tweeting. It was unpresidential. What does that mean, unpresidential? I didn't even know what that means.
It means I don't have a fucking argument to justify the bullshit I'm saying, so I'm saying that a president shouldn't do this.
I just never had a problem with Trump. His tweets are always funny. They're informative.
By the way, weren't the fireside chats unpresidential when they started?
Well, people complained. They said that he shouldn't be doing this.
Right, because it was unpresidential. Because, presidents should never come down from Mount Olympus to confraternize with the hoi polloi. They should stay over there and be like zoos up in a mountain. And Roosevelt, a populist, also, quite. I have to say, corporatist fascist, but that's not the point. Didn't give a shit, and came down and did it anyway. And for him, it was an enormous success. It was an enormous success. But he shouldn't have been using radio like that. Trump's use of Twitter is no different than Roosevelt's use of radio
Yeah.
or Clinton's use of TV.
Yeah.
So each one uses the medium that corresponds to their age. And those who don't like it, can jump into the time tunnel, get the fuck out of here, go back to the 30s.
Well, I remember before the election, somebody was talking about some non-Trump supporting conservative was talking about how everyone was just exhausted after the first Trump term. And I just thought that was the weirdest thing I ever heard. How could you be exhausted? Like, what does that mean? How could you be exhausted?
You're bitching and moaning 24/7. Sometimes you have to take a rest,
I guess so. I guess you're staying up all night, not getting any sleep. I mean, politics has never exhausted me. On election night, I didn't tune in until, about halfway through the counting. I didn't start watching until, I think the Pacific time zone was still, I think that was the last state left. And I knew right away that Trump was going to win, and he's going to win big. And if you're watching politics like that, the way you're watching the election, and you're emotionally engaged in it, then yeah, I guess you could be exhausted by politics, but that's a sickness. The average person should not put that much emotion into politics. You should care about politics, but you shouldn't be putting so much emotion into it that.
No. But you're correct. Not at an emotional level. I mean, it is our duty as citizens to be informed.
Yeah.
This system of ours does not work without an informed citizenry participating in the political process. That doesn't mean that all have to. I'm okay with a 50% participation because the other 50% doesn't give a shit. That's fine by me. But those who vote, have the duty to inform themselves. I blame them for not knowing, not the candidates. Because access to information is something that in our day and age is so easy, there is no excuse not to know.
I was just thinking today about how I used to get my information prior to the internet. I remember I had to find a particular book, and I had to go to the downtown Los Angeles and go to the Los Angeles Public Library.
Yep.
I had to reserve the book for myself. I parked in the library parking lot where they charge $8 an hour for parking. And no, it was $8 for 15 minutes. Basically, if you spent 2 hours there, you paid I don't know.
You bought the book.
Exactly. And I was just thinking, like, now, okay, with the title of a book, with the name of a painting, with the name of an artist, I can always find what I need. And this thing that we're using to do this show now, it's a bloody miracle. That Australia is about to ban the use of social media by children 16 and under.
Oh yes, the freaking idiots.
Yeah, and I mean, okay, for one thing, it's not going to work. The kids are going to find every possible way around it. They say they're going to use biometrics and all sorts of
biometrics. My ass, there is absolutely no way they can stop a 14-year-old from getting to their games or even porno sites. There are so many ways around that. And short of putting a cop in every home in front of every computer, there is no way to stop it.
Yeah, don't give them ideas. This is Australia we're talking about.
I know, but fuck them. They can always get someplace else. They voted for this shit.
Yeah.
Maybe they should live with a cop on every home. And in the meantime, while these fuckers are talking about, closing entry to 16-year-olds into the largest freaking library in the history of mankind, we have this kind of shit going on that the government of Australia, among others, are not paying heed to. This is an article from an Italian website, Formiche. I strongly recommend it to you. It has a lot of very good information, and somewhere around here there is for those who don't speak Italian, there is a translation tab, so you can read, and even in Google, I'm sure you can find a way to see the translated version of this. But this one is the algorithmic cognitive war, the latest menace to come from China. This is after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. China has developed the algorithmic cognitive war using artificial intelligence to influence individuals through an enormous quantity of data. In this article, they explain how Peking or Beijing uses these data to create content that that can exploit this algorithm, and TikTok is the center of the move. And it goes to explain how they use this data mining through TikTok and other media to create propaganda that is tailored and then delivered to the group for which it was created. It's a very, very precise form of misinformation. And if you talk to 14, 15, 16-year-olds that have been using TikTok, you'll immediately realize how freaking effective this is. Not only in what they think they know about stuff, for instance, Gaza, but in the choice of the subjects they discuss, which is even more important to undermine our society. They're not looking at that. They're looking at how to keep 16-year-olds from Trump's tweets.
Yeah.
Talk about stupid and suicidal.
Well, the thing about the bulwark against all of this is good parenting. That you raise your kid in such a way that they're immune to Chinese, algorithmic warfare. But I mean, this explains in part why leftists, why Democrats were so absolutely shattered by the results of the 2024 election. They honestly thought that they were going to win. They thought that Kamala was miles ahead, and the most spectacular meltdowns by mostly women are all on TikTok, and it's just the usual thing. They've been doing this for years. You see these compilations where they put like 20 little different thumb windows up on the page, and it's all women screaming. They're all having meltdowns in their cars or in their homes, and they're all leftists, and they're screaming because somebody won who they didn't think had a chance to win, or I don't know. It's an amazing thing. Exactly. More and more public figures are doing that, which proves they're not afraid to show that they support.
To show the thing, you see it everywhere, from football stadiums to theaters.
Yep.
Yeah, let's. By the way, have you noticed how that move alone changes the mood and people laugh?
Yeah.
It's fantastic. It's fantastic.
No, if there's any integrity in presidential historical presidential history, I know that what's his name? Is his name Beschloss? Was he the presidential historian? Michael Beschloss?
Oh yes.
He's lost his marbles. He's off his rocker now. But if there's any integrity in the future, they're going to study the Trump campaign in awe and wonder, how the hell did a 78-year-old man, apparently during the last 3 weeks of the campaign, he basically never slept. Nobody saw him sleeping. He was doing, seven events a day. He was flying all across the country constantly. And he never showed signs of slowing down. So, Trump earned his victory, despite the horrible quality of his opponent. He still earned his victory. He didn't sit back and say, we'll
come on, he was like the fucking Duracell bunny.
Yep.
He would do a 3-hour sit down over here, a 2-hour rally over there, and still make it in time for another rally before midnight. And that guy crisscrossed the country, worked his ass off, probably slept standing up.
I've read that people like him will take like 15-minute cat naps, and they'll do that several times a day, and that'll
the power naps.
Exactly.
The power naps. It's the only thing that keeps me alive.
Yep.
Because as you know, I have quite a bit of difficulty sleeping normal hours. And the one thing that saves me is the 15-minute nap that I take maybe 2 or 3 times a day, depending on levels of activity. Same thing when I'm driving.
You nap while you're driving?
Yes, literally. Listen, instead of sometimes, if we have to do a show, I'll get into a hotel.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because I cannot do the show otherwise. If I don't have to do a show, I keep driving. I'll just stop at a rest area, nap for 15 minutes, and keep going. And I can drive up to 36 hours like that.
See, I've never been a napper. If I would try to nap for 15 minutes, it's going to turn into 3 hours, no problem.
If it turns into the 3 hours, you're knockout for the count.
Exactly.
You're going to be a zombie the rest of the day. But the problem is, if you try to nap by getting into bed, into a dark room and cool, the fuck if you're going to wake up. When you wake up, you say, fuck it, I'll stay another 15 minutes.
Yep.
But if you're sitting in the car.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's 10 degrees outside, and you're covered with, say, a jacket, or I always carry for this purpose a little, like, airplane blanket. Trust me, when the 15 minutes are over, you want to turn on that engine and the heat and keep moving.
I knew a guy in college who could do that. He would set his alarm clock for 15 minutes, and then he would instantly just go out like a light.
Yeah, and you do. Now, since we are running out of time, let me show you the last thing that I had selected for this. There we go. And this is Romania has now officially become a member of the F-35 club.
Excellent.
And they're getting 32.
That'll put them on a par with the entire Russian Air Force.
Listen, the entire Russian Air Force is already nullified by the Scandinavian Air Force right next to St. Petersburg.
Yep.
32, because what people forget is that the F-35 is not just, like the F-16. It's a bomber too.
Yep. As an internal bomb bay.
Yeah, it's not just a fighter. It's a bomber. 32 F-35 and stealth. And Russian, we have seen in Iran that Russian anti-air defenses are totally useless. The Israelis used their F-35s to go and tickle Khamenei's bird and out, and they took out all of the S-300, S-400 air defenses without breaking a sweat.
Yeah.
So 32 bombers from Romania, which are now added to the ones in Poland. And of course, you also have them in Sweden and Finland. Just those border countries have a fleet of about 200 of them. Whoa. Ivan is fucked.
When Trump was president, the press was obsessed with how dangerous North Korea is. And, Trump was playing with fire. He was going to be outsmarted by Kim Jong.
World War III. Where did I hear that before?
Well, I read an article, and it was titled something like North Korea's secret weapon. And it was the Antonov AN-32, which is a fabric-covered biplane. And it's a troop carrier. It carries paratroops. And this writer said that this was a stealth aircraft. It couldn't be picked up by radar. And I just laughed my head off. It's like a biplane, regardless of the material composition, it would have the radar cross section of a flying barn.
Yes.
And it was astonishing. I mean, this is like a 90-year-old aircraft, and it can defeat the American and South Korean radar. And it's like, that's a lie. Like, who told you that, you idiot?
Whoever it is, feed them to your troops. Your troops need some kind of food anyway.
Yeah.
Desperately, like yesterday. Speaking of North Korean troops, they just lost 3 generals, and their commander is in critical condition in hospital because Ukraine blew up the bunker. By the way, these fucking Russians will never learn. Their incapacity to learn from their own mistakes is, at this point, for the Guinness Book of Records.
Yeah.
Nobody's ever been so stupid for so long. And they keep doing the same thing. They keep losing their brass in the same way. Because from the beginning of this war, they think that bombs won't get to them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what it is. I know that the Russians are very arrogant. They have a pejorative that they use for the Ukrainians that's sort of equivalent to the N-word. And the Ukrainians call the Russians orcs, but that's based entirely on their behavior. They do behave like orcs. But the Russian pejorative is based on a racial, ethnic
which is funny because to separate the Slavs from one side and the other of that line is almost impossible. How can you have an ethnic joke about that?
Well, it also flies in the face of the Russians. The Russians are constantly saying that Ukrainians are just Russians who have been brainwashed or whatever. So it's
Well, I would remind those assholes that the Rus first established the kingdom or duchy of Kiev,
yeah.
and that most of these idiots can trace back their national history to a bunch of Scandinavians settling in what is now Ukraine.
Yeah.
And then came, Novgorod, and they have Novgorod and Kiev as rival kingdoms for quite a while. But of course, they were cousins. I mean, their ignorance is appalling.
Their ignorance and their incompetence. That Russians are one of their chief hallmarks is incompetence. And again, not talking about individuals, but talking about the government's policies, and the culture in general. Like you said, I mean, they're still sending troops into fortified positions, and they all get killed.
They all get killed.
And
they were they had to send 50,000 troops to Kursk.
Yeah.
By the way, the occupied zone of Kursk is like this.
Yeah.
When you see a larger map, you really have to look for it. And 50,000 troops that they could have used in Zaporizhia and Kherson, in Donetsk, they have to be in Kursk defending Russian territory, and they're falling like flies. They're losing more people so far in just a few months in Kursk alone than twice what they lost in Afghanistan in 10 years.
Yeah.
This is almost kamikaze. This is suicidal.
And none of it makes sense.
No.
The Japanese would have the kamikaze. There was a rationality behind it. One airplane can destroy one ship, and
one airplane made with canvas and 3 cents can destroy an entire ship. That made a lot of economic sense.
The kamikazes caused far more casualties in the final battle, the Battle of Okinawa. I mean, we lost, Jesus, I think it was 25,000 dead or something. And the videos you see when the airplane does get through and it hits the ship, and it the ship's gone.
Yeah.
But the Russian.
That's how my Uncle Harry died. My mother's uncle, Harry, he was in the Biscay Bay and escort. And he was hit by a kamikaze, and there's actually film of this, and you can see where the plane hits, and within minutes, the whole thing sank.
Yep.
And took the sailors with it. And in that sense, it made sense. You were trading one life and one sophisticated kite for a whole ship.
Yeah. Well, what the Russians are doing now, they're doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over again with having the same result. I mean, the Chinese human waves in the Korean War worked initially, and then the whole rest of the time,
they just piled corpses.
Well, they sent in low-flying aircraft to strafe them, and these planes would come back to base with blood and guts on the underside of the plane because they were flying at 8 feet. And
can you imagine what a Warhawk can do with that?
Exactly. I mean, if the Russians,
we have even better aviation for that is specifically designed for that purpose.
If the Russians are stupid enough to use tactical nukes against the Ukrainians, then we're going to send in everything we have in terms of air power, and that's going to be the end of the Russian armed forces. And we will take out their nuclear facilities for good measure. We'll bomb everything in sight. And Trump will let Putin know, this is what's going to happen. Plus, we're going to destroy all your dachas. We're going to go after you,
Yeah.
Mr. Vlad, since you started all this shit.
Yep. Anyway, we do have way over 1,000 people watching now, but sorry, guys. We've been here for 3 hours plus. And I think we need to hydrate and dehydrate. Notice that you're talking to two boomers with a blather the size of Texas, because we can blather for 3 hours, 4 hours, and nobody's getting to go to the loo. So
it's a shared bladder, right?
Eh?
It's a shared bladder.
It's a shared blather, yes. But it's not a question of abusing a good thing so much. And blather or no, we have to end the blather and leave something for next week. Let me just remind everybody again, support people, makes things happen. For those who weren't here when I used my first interlude to shake the tree, remember that none of this is possible unless you support us so we can pay for this shit. So, send us a cup of coffee, 2 cups of coffee, I don't care. $5, $2, $3, $100, it's your choice. And if enough people do that, we can stop begging and talk about more interesting stuff. If not, well, what the hell? All good things must come to an end. So far, so good. Enough of you are responding. And none of us is going to get rich on this thing, but at least we're going to pay for the things that we need to keep our forum going and this channel going. So why isn't the show called Beer Blather with a double D? Well, because we don't pee in the show, we just talk. Get it? So anyway, support us. There are several ways of doing this. You click support, you can join the channel, you can subscribe to my @thebrotherlie timeline in Twitter. And the only reason I suggest you subscribe to mine and not Thomas's is because he doesn't have subscriptions yet. So the subscriptions come over here, and all of them point in the same direction, which is maintaining both the forum and this channel, and God forbid, maybe finish some great ideas we have with the forum and expand our channel to other matters. So that said, Thomas. Oh, I forgot. I noticed you laughed the first time, so I'm going to do it again. If you can find no other reason to support this channel, do it because fuck the Clintons. That's it. And somebody was mentioning, Thomas, right here, a new meme of Kim Jong Un crying over a desk over the fact that now Trump has found a new rocket man. I think it's cute. And while we're at it, fuck Kim Jong Un too. My last thought, before I ask you for your last thought and or word. We mentioned it in passing, but I am obsessed with it. We are at war. We have been at war for quite some time. We confront an enemy made of an alliance of Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea, with occasional companions every now and then, and some feeble allies every now and then. There is no difference within the context of this war between Israel and Ukraine. Both are countries that are defending themselves against not just violent aggression, but perverse aggression. The systematic bombing of civilians, of schools, of hospitals in Ukraine, what the Russians are doing there, the systematic destruction of cities until there is no inhabitable hovel in the whole place, is no different than Hamas murdering and raping civilians or targeting them with rockets, or Hezbollah, the same thing. And the response of both Israel and Ukraine of targeting military installations, tanks, fuel depots, weapons depots, is very similar. One cannot support the one and not the other. Period. Both demand our unconditional support. And it is about time that we did away with the nuisance of these little fuckers in Iran and Russia who are destabilizing the world in a desperate attempt of gaining a little advantage, regional advantage. I don't see myself walking this position back. And Thomas, the floor is yours if you want to say something.
No, I agree 100%. It's, you and I are one of the few people who support both Ukraine and Israel. It's a no-brainer for us, so I can't add anything to what you already said.
I have one thing. I'm Israel High, motherfuckers. This has been a great week and people don't know it, but Hezbollah is going the way of Sinwar.
Oh, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
And all eyes on Tehran, as Khamenei may soon be replaced by his son. And shit is moving politically enormously in the place. It's rather interesting. It's going to be a free-for-all. That said, Thomas, do you have a last word for us tonight?
Apery.
Eh?
Apery. Apery.
Apery! If it is what I think, I do it sometimes. And so do you on occasion, but not as often. Good night, Thomas. Thank you so much. Good night, everybody. Take care, and see you tomorrow for the quad meet at 10:30 p.m. Bye.